13. I'm Daniel J. Lewis, and our celebration of podcasting is continuing. We've got coming up in just a minute Andy and Lee from the Asian American Podcasters Group, and they have a lot of great content that they're going to share, talking about how you can podcast mobile, recording on location to grow your podcast audience and guest list. So the Asian American Podcasters podcast has great experience with that. So you will want to hear the information that they're going to share. It'll be really valuable and I think actionable. You'll probably want to take some notes. Make sure that you are watching live. If you're watching on YouTube, go to internationalpodcastday.com/live. And while you're on social, make sure you are still tweeting with that official hashtag International Podcast Day. You can use tchat.io for that or any of your favorite Twitter tools to be able to share. And if you're sharing onto anywhere else on social media, make sure you're using that same hashtag as well, International Podcast Day. Before we get into Lee and Andrew's presentation, I want to thank our wonderful sponsors who help make this live celebration possible. First, our platinum sponsor, Blueberry. Blueberry has been in this space for years and years, probably even before you knew what a podcast was. Blueberry has been there from the beginning. They provide such great tools. They are a full-service podcasting company that provides podcast hosting, statistics, podcast advertising opportunities, and more. They're also the people who created PowerPress, which if you have a WordPress site, you probably have PowerPress on it too, or you've heard about PowerPress. They do so much in the podcasting space, and they are offering a month of free podcast hosting with the promo code Podcast Day. So you can get that link below this video if you're on the live page, or go to internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors to get more information about Blueberry. And thanks to our gold sponsor, Libsyn. Libsyn also offers podcast hosting, control over your distribution, monetization options, a simple site that you can use so you don't have to worry about complicated tools. You can get your own podcast mobile app through Libsyn and much more. Use the promo code STARTFREE to get a free month with Libsyn. Again, link below this video and at internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors. And thanks to repurpose.io, another gold sponsor. They are fantastic at repurposing your podcast, as their name implies. You can repurpose from a live stream to Facebook, or take your audio podcast and repurpose that to YouTube, to Facebook, to your website, and much more. Check it out at repurpose.io. And thanks to our celebration sponsors, Second Line Themes, Geeks Rising, Synth, Outlier, and more. Check out these fantastic sponsors who make International Podcast Day and the celebration this year possible by going to internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors. And now I am thrilled to welcome our presenters for this next session, Lee and Andrew from the Asian American Podcasters podcast. It's over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much for having us. We're so honored to be part of it. Andrew, how are you doing over there?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Daniel J. Lewis. Happy International Podcasters Day to everybody.
Exactly. Across the world. We know it's the home stretch, so we're hoping that you'll enjoy our content. So right now we have recording on location and growing your audience guest list.
Yes, I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. And so I was just going to say that we wanted to take a moment to make it what should we say? Truly international, and give a welcome sign. Can everybody see our welcome in different languages? I can say it in Japanese. Yokoso minasan, 国際的なポッドキャストでようこそお願いいたします。Andrew, how's
Ni
your
men hao. That's my Mandarin for this evening.
Exactly. And then we have bienvenue. That's about the extent of it.
And this all thanks to the University of Philippines.
Exactly. That was from their header. Thank you. Philippines, go. Yay. So tonight we want to share with you tips for recording on location, and by doing that, how it can help you grow your audience and your guest list. Andy, where shall we start?
Well, I think that every podcaster, it doesn't matter if you started 6, 7 years ago or you started yesterday, we all want more downloads. It's never enough.
That's right.
So we're always looking for strategies for growth. And tonight we want to share some tips and tactics and some of our experiences venturing outside of our closets or our home. We want to encourage you to get out of your house.
Yes, yes. Or out from under the table or my living room, as you know, some of us. But first, I think we should do an introduction. So I would like to introduce Andrew Wang to you all. He is, and you're going to fill in the gaps here, business advisor, money management company, but he also has a wonderful show called Inspired Money. And he interviews fantastic folks, and then they talk about money in a little bit. And the other thing is, we came together to create Asian American Podcasters Association earlier this year. Andrew, am I leaving anything out other than you are a musician as well, right?
I am from time to time. Yes. So I have a affinity for microphones.
Exactly. And so, shall we get started then? Or do you?
No, we can't get started. First of all, you're like struck fear into me because now it
Hi,
sounds like I
hi.
have to introduce you, and this was not prepared at all. Before we do that, let me say that I have been publishing Inspired Money for 2 years, over
Nice.
100 episodes.
Yes.
No one taught me, no one showed me or told me at the get-go that I could do seasons.
Right.
So for better or worse, I am publishing every week, every Tuesday, and I've done that consistently. Sometimes had some very late nights, but it's been a great experience. And let me introduce Lee Uehara, who
Thank you.
has several different podcasts. I know that there's House of Life NYC. There's
Yes.
there's Tapping Like a Mother. It's an
Yes.
EFT tapping podcast.
Yes.
You have to fill in the gaps because you have several businesses, you have
Right.
several podcasts, and I cannot keep up.
No. So the one thing that folks need to know is that you and I co-host the Asian American Podcasters podcast. Right. And that's really, this is the first time I've done seasons because I was a little overwhelmed with summer break. But that is just to let you guys know that you can run your show or shows the way you see fit. And if you need a mental health week or month, then take it. Just let your listeners know that that is what you are doing. And I think that's enough for intros. What are your thoughts?
Just two things. One, why the Asian American Podcasters Association?
Yes.
Given the growth of podcasts, we want to advocate for and support more Asian American produced shows and creatives out there. We have a directory of over 400 shows. If you go to aapodcasters.com/directory, you can find all of these shows. And it's really cool because it covers, I think, many categories within podcasting. And it's great to see that variety. And if you have a show out there that we should know about, please let us know.
Exactly. What was the other thing?
I said two things, but that was everything in
That was a
combined.
lot.
I don't know if that was three things or one thing, but that's all I got.
Okay, well, I can just add too that we are one of the first nonprofit podcaster associations. We are working toward the federal 501c3 process, but we are nonprofit at the state level here in New York. I'm very excited to announce that. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up. And throughout our segment tonight, we will be sharing some of our members and their shows and what they're up to. We have some exciting things going on across the globe.
Do you want to do a quick shout out to some of our members?
Let's do that after we well, let's see. Okay, maybe I can go ahead and do this. Okay, so this one is Jeff Vita. He has the Kung Fu Drive-In podcast. The show spotlights the evolution of a traditional Asian film genre and they interview the talents behind it. And his tagline is, "Your Kung Fu may be good, but mine is better." Thanks for listening. You can find that at kungfudrivein.libsyn.com. Let's go ahead and just do another one, shall we?
Let's do one more, and then we'll
All
get
right.
to the topic at hand.
Exactly. So, Asia America, the Ken Fong podcast, just announced that UCLA's Asian American Studies Center is planning to digitally archive all of the episodes since 2015 because their work in interviewing so many members of the AA community because of their work. Fantastic, amazing stuff. You got to check it out.
Yeah, great guests on both of those shows.
Exactly. So can we jump into recording outdoors on location?
Recording outdoors on location. We
Yes.
can definitely do that.
Okay, great. So where do we start? I guess, you had said it before. The thing that we need to do really is just leave the house, right? Leave the house.
We have to leave the house. And with the Asian American Podcasters podcast, one of the initial early episodes or series of episodes, we actually recorded in a park in Manhattan. And
Yes.
there were food trucks with like generators. There was traffic. There were sirens. Maybe you can share with everyone what our gear setup was that day.
Yes. And we should explain also how that came about, right? So it wasn't as though we planned necessarily to record in the park, but because we have the gear, we were able to do so. And you will have it too if you don't yet. And so to answer the question, the gear we had that day, we had 2 dedicated dynamic cardioid microphones. If anybody knows me, I say that everywhere I go. It's like a mantra. And we had 2 of those, particularly the Sennheiser MD46 microphones. And the reason that I mention those is because they are ENG handheld mics. And what that means, ENG is electric news gathering. And so, I actually happen to have one here. This was not planned, by the way, but I probably should have said so. But if you see, the handle is longer so that you can hold it with minimal handling noise. Okay, I'll just show you that real quick. We are not getting paid, but maybe we should. So Steve, maybe we should hit up Sennheiser next year. And so the Sennheisers, actually, the richness that comes out of the mics, the sound is amazing. But anyway, so we had 2 of those microphones, the XLR cables that go with them, to fit into the Zoom H5, which had 2 inputs for the XLR cables. Now, Tascam makes a similar model as well. And then one of us had a set of headphones, and we did a sound check. And if you listen to the first couple of our episodes at Asian American Podcasters podcast, you will hear it that it's perfectly acceptable. And so to just drive home the point further, ENG handheld microphones are the ones that are used on broadcast shows, news, remote recording, or videotaping. When you're on the news, when you're watching the news tonight or tomorrow, you will notice the microphones that they're holding, and they're built specifically to capture your voice and lower the ambient sound. Have I covered everything on that, Andy?
Yeah, I think you have. I think that the key takeaway is that it doesn't have to be complicated. You want something that's convenient and hopefully easy to carry.
Yes.
I like to use things that I already own. So Lee mentioned that I'm a musician sometimes.
Yes.
So I have stage microphones. Again, they're cardioid dynamics microphones. I have some Sennheiser E935s. They're great stage mics.
Mm-hmm.
And because I own those already, I
Yes.
tend to use those as part of my mobile rig. I also have a Zoom portable handheld recorder.
Yes.
If you do not have one of those,
right, this is the H5.
Odds are that you have if you're an Apple user, odds are you have an iPhone or an iPad, and I've used those too. Sean Smith has a mobile rig, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I have this little gizmo. It's a USB dual pre. It's an ART. USB dual pre, and I can plug 2 USB cables and microphones into this, take this out to an iPad, and then the iPad becomes my digital recorder. So
Mhm.
if you have an iPad or you have an iPhone, just make sure that you put it in airplane mode so that you don't get a phone call mid-recording. But if you have that, this gadget, I think, is, I don't know, maybe $79, something like
That's
that. So
it?
under $100. It doesn't need power. If you needed phantom power, there's a 9-volt that it takes, but otherwise with the dynamic microphones, you don't need power, and it works really well. It works. It's easy to use, and with an iPad, you've got the big screen, so you can see, you can see the waveform, and you can see if things are going well or not.
I'd be afraid that I'd drop an iPad. Have you ever dropped yours?
No, try
Oh,
not to jinx me.
Knock on some wood here. Wait, there we go.
So, like, why would we want to use these setups and go outside of the comfort of our homes, right? Because I think that podcasting, that's one of the nice things, that there are low barriers to entry. You can sit in the comfort of your own home. As I said, sometimes it's really late at night, and I'm doing
Just
this.
sometimes.
Yeah, okay. So quite often. I'm getting better though. But the key is, when you get out, you have visibility, and it really brings some fun adventure. So we mentioned that we met up in a park to record some
Mhm.
podcast episodes. Lee, maybe you can share some of the other events and types of things that we've gone to.
Yes, yes. Well, we've recorded at conferences. We have recorded at lectures. We have recorded in a setting where it was live. There were things going on. And then we were actually a podcast recording station. And we've also recorded a live episode in the middle of a large convention hall. And the one thing that I want to make sure to remember to tell you is that when you are recording on location, you're going to, this is the SM58, just record and hold up the microphone for 10, 15, even a minute, 10, 15 seconds to a minute, and get that ambient sound, because you may need it to lay under as a bed when you are producing the piece. But it also it gives you more flexibility than if you just turn on the microphone and start recording your interview. I've answered the question? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we've done all kinds of things. We went to a panel discussion at a film festival. So
Yes.
we interviewed some of the people there. We went to an event where creatives were pitching. Everybody got, was it 60 seconds or 2 minutes?
We got no.
They were
We
like 60-second pitches, I think.
Those were the runner-ups. I think you and I got 2 minutes or something.
Oh, well, now I feel my head is getting big.
and I totally drew a blank, and Andy had to come save the day. But yes, and we also we recorded audio at a festival outside in Chinatown in Lower Manhattan here in New York City.
Yeah, if you want to try something different, get a booth at an
Yes.
outdoor festival. We did
Yes.
this for Asian American Podcasters Association, but it was so cool because next door to us were an Asian American film festival, and we got to record. We interviewed them on the spot
Yes.
because they were our nice neighbors, and we also
They
got
were
to
so
learn
nice.
about the film
Yes.
festival that they produce every year.
They were such nice neighbors. And the cool thing about it is they had really awesome friends and guests at their booth that we also interviewed,
They did. And I mean, I think the beauty about getting out there, putting yourself out there, we had microphones, we had our gear. So inevitably, people are asking, what are you guys doing? And it also gave us the opportunity, had handouts that explained to people kind of 1, 2, 3, step 1, 2, 3, how
Uh,
do you listen to a podcast?
Exactly.
And we also collected emails, and there was just tremendous interest both in listening to podcasts, and then there were also people at this outdoor festival who were either podcasters already, or they
Yes.
had interest in launching a podcast, so they wanted information.
Exactly. And you know what? I'm just looking at the chat, and we have to give a shout out to Stephanie Fujio. She's all the way in Asia, and she has been staying up. She's been up, I swear. What time did you start watching the live stream? Oh my gosh. And Jules Hannaford, welcome. Hi.
Jules Hannaford in Hong Kong. All right.
Yes. And Stephanie's saying she loves her some dynamic mics. Who doesn't? Once you can never go back once you've crossed.
Excuse me. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know. Being the musician, I like both.
All right.
I
all
have
right.
condenser mics. I have
Okay.
dynamic mics. The
Well,
more the merrier, really.
yes. Yeah. Okay. But we're talking about recording on location, and we promise we will answer how that helps you grow your audience and your guest list. We do want to keep going though with some other tips and techniques for recording outdoors. Basically, what you need to do is look for the least noisy place in the area. And the other thing too is when you're recording on location, if you are at a panel discussion or something, and the discussion or the talk ends, you want to already have your gear hooked up and ready to record, because you don't want to miss a chance opportunity with a guest who you know will be busy after the talk. So you want to just rush up there and with the microphone, really. I mean, that's a news technique. I used to be a reporter, and so you really it's kind of like driving. You don't ever want to hesitate. If you know you want to make that move, then take it. And so with grabbing interviews with highly sought after people, if you're in their proximity, go for it. That's another tenet of recording on location, is go for it. And by the way, with this ENG handheld mic, you have a longer reach than somebody with maybe a shorter mic.
My preference is always to have two microphones when you can. But if
Yes.
you have one, it's doable, but you should make sure that you're the one who's driving the microphone, because
Yes.
hopefully you're experienced, so you are not taking it away from your mouth or the guest's mouth before you finish speaking.
That's right. That's right. And so what Annie means is, if you have one microphone, you're blah, blah, blah. Oh, and okay. And sometimes people will try to grab the microphone because it's an instinct. So what you need to do is tell them in the beginning, oh, and I'm going to go ahead and hold the microphone for us. Let them know that that's coming up ahead. And here's the thing, even if you don't have microphones and all you have is your cell phone, you may want to buy what's called a dead kitten, even though I prefer to call it a furry kitten, right? And it looks kind of like a troll head with the onion hair. But if you don't have one of those, but you have your when you have your cell phone, what I like to do is if being half Japanese, that's what this is. We are, and maybe you have it in other parts of the world as well. This is known as an asefuki, which means a sweat wipe, a sweat towel. But what happens is you just cover your cell phone, right? And it acts as sort of a windscreen. Or maybe I know this might be kind of out there, but carry a small sock. Or if it's cooler out, use a scarf or part of. I have to tell you, when I was recording indoors, I had a chance opportunity to meet with someone, but the only place we could record was in the hallway, and it was very hollowy, and I was really, this is one regret. So if you can learn from me tonight, no regrets. And what that regret was, and the guy I interviewed was a fellow podcaster, and I regret not asking him if he would take his jacket off and go under his head, under the, the hood of the coat, because when you listen to it, it was kind of hollow and tinny and echoey. But anyway, Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I think that, yeah, there's no shame. And You have to be willing to sacrifice for the
Yes.
best sound possible.
Yes, yes. And the entry to barrier is low to podcast and to get your message out there. Oh, we enjoy your having. Thank you, Jules. That was very sweet of you. And so the thing is, even though the barrier to entry is low, I would love to encourage everyone to invest in a good microphone. There is no reason why, in this day and age, your audio quality can't be amazing or even better than just walking down the street with your cell phone. At least get the washcloth or something. But again, there's no reason in this day and age that if you're going to invest your time in a passion project or to try to monetize it, please invest in quality sound. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and again, I think that you don't want to go overboard and make it overly complicated. It can
Yeah,
be super simple.
exactly.
We have used the Zoom recorder. We've used the iPad with this Art USB device. This summer, I was in Asia and I just had my Apple earbuds with my iPhone, and I recorded some Asian American podcasters podcast episodes.
Hmm.
And I think that you do a little bit of editing and post production, not a lot, and it's acceptable. I think that it's a decent sound.
Well, and the other thing too is, please, if you're going to use your cell phone, download a voice recorder app that allows you to record in wave form and to do the 44 or 16-bit or whatever it is that you've decided that's best for your show. But again, if you can record in wave format, that is even better than just MP3. Does yours do that, Andy?
Of course, and I have a couple of favorites.
Yeah.
One is the Alphonic app. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I started with, but lately I've been using a Rode Reporter app,
Mm.
which Rode makes. The Rode, the manufacturer of microphones and other audio gear. Uh, that app is just so simple, because if you go to the App Store, or I guess Google App Store, you look up Rode, RODE Reporter, and to me it doesn't get much simpler than that. It's
Mhm.
really like a big record button,
Yeah.
and I like it because it's as close to idiot proof as anything that I've found. So you just hit record. You can see your two channels if you're using two microphones.
Mhm.
And with my device, I end up recording each microphone to its own track. I think each has a mono track, one
Mhm.
left, one right, that I
Nice.
can load into my DAW. But
Mhm.
yes, you can select wave, and it lets you choose the audio quality. So yeah, it works out great, and I like it
Yes.
a lot.
And there's something called the Ceremonic iRig where you can hook it up to your cell phone and then hook up an XLR microphone to that. So if you only have room for one microphone in your cell phone, that's another way to go. And is now a good time to take a break and share the work of other Asian American podcasters'
Sure, go
work?
for it.
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen and share with you our member June Han. He is an AA Asian American podcast pioneer starting back years ago. And he wants you to know that his new technology helps podcasters grow their audience. And his company is Awesome Guests at the platform. And you can get his guide, 3smartways.com, which is going to be very helpful to you. And then we have Caption Red's Young Legends podcast. And the reason that we're highlighting this one particularly is because Caption Red is a Korean American podcaster who started a podcast to help teenagers become successful. So, this is a great show to have your teen listen to. And Andrew, Caption Red is entertaining, informative, and he's also, I'm just going to say, he's a teacher, a high school teacher. So, that really, I think, we want to encourage the next generation to do XYZ. And I think this podcast is exemplary in that regard.
Fantastic.
Okay. So
Do you have a second one?
that was the second one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention, apparently.
It's late somewhere, right? And so we want to cover recording indoors. Or do you think we should go on to growing? Where do you think we should go next?
I want to talk about expanding your guest list, because by getting out there, it's a great way to expand your guest list. We talked about doing that outdoor festival where we had a booth, and kind of it was really spontaneous. We were interviewing our neighbors there. And also when we went to a film festival panel, that was opportunistic too. After the panel was done, we approached the panelists and we ended up recording, I think, 3 short segments with 3 out of the 4 panelists. So that worked out great. But I wanted to share some of the preliminary work that you can do ahead of a conference. And this is what I've done in the past. I've gone through the website of the conference and really specifically looking at different speakers to see who I think would be a great guest for my show and of interest to my audience. Many times I don't know who they are, but reading their bio piqued my interest. So I'll draft an email. I'll just create like an email template saying, I'm going to be at this conference, or in the case of where I am also a speaker, I can tell them that I'm a fellow speaker at this conference and I would love to interview you on my podcast. Really simple. Keep it basic. Maybe include some of my past guests, a sentence or 2 about what my show's about. And then I have a scheduling link that the person can click and pick a day and a time, give me their cell phone number so that we can arrange a place to record.
Right.
And I find that works really great because many speakers who are attending a conference, they like to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yes.
Just last month, I interviewed a CEO of a company who was a speaker, and he told me just that. He said, I'm happy to do this because since I'm here, I might as well do an interview and kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that you can do because it's about accessibility. You going to a conference just makes it very convenient that you have access to some of these speakers that it might be cumbersome or more difficult to schedule something remotely, right?
Exactly.
Because they tend to be busy. You can seize the opportunity of convenience. And you can also be spontaneous at conferences too, because I've done that as well. I've attended somebody's session, found that it was really interesting. And like everybody else who, after the session is done, people line up to, network with the speaker, to get some feedback, ask a question. And one time I did that and I said, I really enjoyed your session and I'd love to interview you on my show sometime. And to my surprise, he responded, "Oh, cool. Do you want to do that right now?"
See? Yes, you've got to be ready and you've got to ask.
And I said yes. So, after his meet and greet and everything was done, we found a place. It was just like in this telephone bay where the hotel courtesy telephones were at this conference. So it was relatively quiet. And I think we recorded about 30 minutes and it worked out great.
Yes. You're mentioning of the hotel phone bay reminds me of this other nugget. When you are at a conference, now some of you watching now may not have a podcast just yet, and maybe you're going to a conference or something. I have made several offers to people I've run into at conferences who don't have a podcast yet, and they keep saying, "Oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." And I say, "Well, you know what? I have the recording equipment. You want to record your first episode in the hallway now?" Like, let's get started on your show. Do not wait, because the minute you start, you're going to say, man, I should have started sooner, because either it's fun or you figured out whether you want to continue. And in terms of guest lists, so Andrew, you're very prepared. And I am more, okay, I'm just going to check out this event and I'll bring my equipment and let's see what happens. if
That works too.
if I don't have a specific person in mind. And that's another tip. When you go to a meetup, a conference, and you know who's going to be there, like Andrew said, figure out where that person will be. Not stalking, or maybe, I don't know, but you want to just keep your eye on the prize and the goal and ask. Just ask, because what's the worst? Oh, and then here's the other thing. When you are out and about, increasing your guest list, and this kind of ties into audience too, but also, if they don't have time for an interview, say, hey, could you just record a drop for me? And chances are half of them will say, what's a drop? And then you'll say, oh, it's when you say, hi, I'm so and so, and you're listening to blah, blah, blah. Or, hi, I'm so and so from La 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 Company or show, and you're listening to blah, blah, blah. And that gets people excited. And, there is. And Andrew, you have to share your thoughts on this. Shout outs. Some people think they're stupid. In fact, somebody told me that the other day, but he was gracious enough and did it for me anyway. And the thing is, if all you can get is person X to say, yes, this is so and so, and I'm listening to your show, and I'd like to give a shout out to Aunt Sally out in Montana, or in the foothills of France, wherever, that's something. And that makes that, that also adds a little something something to your show. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it depends on your show and your listeners, but being live somewhere gives you the opportunity to ask. And oftentimes, as you probably know, it's much easier, it's much harder to say no to somebody to their face versus an email where it's very
Well,
easy just to ignore it.
the older you get, the easier it is to say no, don't you find?
Well, I don't know. Then maybe you should be targeting younger people. I don't know what to tell you.
So I just, Stephanie is saying that yes, people should just start their podcast and see what the podcast wants to be or tell you. And then we've got a new viewer coming on board, Ross Brand. Hey, and you know what? Ross is part of the NYC video meetup, who I met the other day at the meetup. And that is a prime example. When you are in a meeting, a meetup, a conference, and you just kind of gel with people, they understand what you're going for. And not only will they help you, but maybe then they'll turn around and say, hey, can I interview you? Ross pulled out his ENG handheld and we had a hoot of a time, and that was unplanned. Andrew, I wish you were there.
I wish I was there too.
So now I would like to, if you don't mind, give another eye opener to our next Asian American Podcasters Association member. They're doing some really important work in Singapore. And so I okay, so great. So I need to share the screen. Let me just send. Okay, great. So this is what y'all need to know. Asia Podcast Awards and the Asia Podcast Summit.com. This is run by two fabulous ladies, Raven Lim and Ling Ling Tai. It's the first of its kind, the Asia Podcast Summit.com. Go there for your free access pass for 48 hours. And voting starts on October 5th for the best podcasts in Asia that are in English language. So go to asiapodcastsummit.com. And then we want to tell you about some important work. I mean, everybody's work is important. Maybe not mine, because you know what? My show is all about fun, but this is serious. Terry Yuan's Engendered podcast. It aims to create awareness and dialogue and help change what's going on, to end gender-based violence. And so we just want to let folks know about that. And so what do we want to share next, Andrew?
Hi, Terry. Terry was at that outdoor festival with us.
Yes. And thank goodness, Terry, thank you, because her Mandarin helped us out of some pickles.
Yeah, she was explaining
Yes.
podcasting to people in
Yes.
Mandarin and Cantonese, I think.
Yes. A talented podcaster for sure.
The
Very helpful.
podcasting world is so small because I was actually I was listening to Ross Brand's podcast today, trying to do a little research. So shout out to Ross. Hello out there.
Yes. He's saying hi. Yes,
And
Stephanie says fun is important too. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
no worries. I just wanted to share that if you, the viewer, are like me, when I started, I was really reluctant to do an in-person interview. I liked the safety of being at my desk behind a computer screen and doing audio only. So they couldn't even see me and I couldn't see them, which was great because I could have notes sprawled all over my desk and sort of an outline on where I might go during the interview.
Mhm.
So the initial in-person interviews were a little scary because I felt like I had to be prepared, but I didn't have the crutch of all these questions or notes if I
Mhm.
needed them.
Yeah.
I think that was a little foolish, actually, because when we watch journalists on TV, oftentimes they have a list of questions or they have a notebook. So you can still have some notes and you can even write notes as the person speaking, which I
Yes.
tend to do since I have listening problems. And when someone's speaking, I can jot down some notes, or especially if I have a thought that I want to ask about or I want to come back to, I need to
Mhm.
write that down. Otherwise, if I'm in the moment, I totally forget and space out. So I like, if you're not doing this, besides getting out there, taking your podcasting sort of on the road, it's great to have these face-to-face interviews because they just tend to be so much better.
Mhm.
Um, it's less likely that you're going to talk over to each other because you're face-to-face, and it's just a lot of fun. And I think that because podcasting is a platform that provides us with an opportunity to talk to so many people that we would not have spoken to otherwise, meeting in person is even better, right? I mean, you get to establish
Yes.
that relationship. And I think on that note, when we're talking about going to a conference or an event and having that additional access to people where you can invite them onto your show, I think probably 15 to 20% of my guests on my podcast have come from taking advantage of being at a live event and asking people who are there, who likely I would not have had on my show otherwise. And the good news is that, what do you have to lose? If they say no, they say no. And it's just like inviting guests doing remotely. You never know who's going to say yes. But the benefit of asking at an event is that even if it's inconvenient and there's not time for you to sit down and do a podcast interview, you have a great opportunity to just make that relationship. It increases the chances, I think, exponentially that you can even schedule something in the future because someone will give you their card and say, "Oh, I am interested. Right now, we really don't have time, but here's my card. Email me." And the chances are much better that you've met in person and you can refer to that event.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's all about relationships.
Exactly. And before we move on to growing your audience, two things. One, in terms of the asking and everything, Andrew, you said before when we were talking in the green room about getting as many no's as possible. So I'd like you to, if you could, spend like 30 seconds on that. And before you do, though, I want to share a tip about writing notes. So here's a tip for y'all, so that you can be cool like Oprah and hosts on the Today Show and things. Is design a half sheet with your logo on one side and on the other side lines, so that you can have your show note cards. That's what I do. And you can put your bullet points on there, and then it actually looks really cool when you hold it up to look at it, because then your guest or whoever's around you sees your show logo and it's like, oh, this is official. So Andy, tell us about the nose, shortly before we go on to growing your audience.
Sure. The goal to get 100 no's for the year, I got that from Amy Porterfield earlier this year. I think one of her coaches had given it to her, and she talked about it on her show. Set a goal to get 100 no's, get 100 rejections. And I applied that to my podcast guest outreach. And it's great because most of the time when you invite somebody, you just don't hear back from them.
Right.
But now when I get a no, I celebrate because I actually get to check it off my list. I'm like, I got another no. Because it's really hard to get 25 no's per quarter. But the benefit is that it really pushes you to reach a little bit further and send out more invites and not be discouraged from the no's. You actually get excited by them.
Yes.
So it's been a great experience. I encourage each and every one of you out there to try it. It's a lot of fun, actually.
Yes. And living in New York, I get a lot of no's every day. So But Daniel, can you help us show the next slide? So we'd like to highlight Asian American podcaster member Sheena Yap Chan's The Tao of Self-Confidence. She interviews and represents women who are Asian worldwide. And so you can visit and listen to her show at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. She's been at it for quite a while. Very impressive. And then we have a newcomer to our membership, Winter Red. She has two podcasts. That's Winter Red. Hungry Squared podcast. That's about food and science. And then the second podcast she has, I think, can touch so many lives. It's called Still a Part of Us podcast. It's about those who've experienced stillborn children. So stillapartofus.com. It's very also, you hear me, I feel like I'm being redundant, but I deeply mean it when it says people all over the world are doing amazing things. Yes. And so let's save that last one for the for the end. Growing your audience. One way to grow your audience. Yes, Andy, go ahead.
I was just going to thank Daniel for driving. And
Yes,
just one quick answer for Steph. She asked me if I've reached 100 no's. I have not. I'm not even close. I think I'm getting like 5 no's per quarter. So I'm like I'm off the mark by 20 every quarter. Clearly, I have not been pushing hard enough.
Yes. And Ross Brand says, thanks for listening, Andy. Andrew. So growing your audience, part of getting out there is helping you to grow your audience. If you remain in your quilted cave or your closet, your audience misses you. You need to go out and do a grassroots thing. As Andrew was saying, it's the real person in real life connections. And so every time you meet someone, oh, hey, do you listen to podcasts? When recording on location, oh, hey, if you record this drop or give a shout out, I'll text you or email you when it comes out. And if you could share it with your friends and family, that'd be amazing. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Or may I borrow your phone? What? How did this get to the iPhone, the podcast app? I don't know. This is crazy.
Exactly.
Is that my show? Why did you? I don't know who subscribed to you. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, Andrew, do you have any other tips for growing your audience?
Yeah, I think that most simplistically, it's about visibility. And Lee is talking about guerrilla marketing. I mean, I think that that's the reality that we're faced with. You're trying to win one listener at a time. It's very slow, but it does work. And over time, that accumulates, and that organic growth is really positive, because when listeners find you one person at a time, there is a stickiness there. I think that they tend to stick around.
Yes.
And the more that you get out there, you're letting people know that you have a podcast about what you do. And it opens the door to collaborate sometimes with different organizations. In our case, there's an organization in New York. We went to their event. We brought our gear. We recorded some short interviews with some of the other attendees there. And it gave us an opportunity to speak to the organizer, the organizing, what do you call it? Entity, the organizing.
The organizers.
The organizers. Thank you. Yes, that's a really big word.
Late. We have about a minute or so.
So we have another, so we'll have, I think in November, we're going to do some programming with them that's podcast related.
Yes.
So it's all about visibility and getting these opportunities. And, we talked about recording at a conference, and I started doing that just one-on-one with people in a hallway, sometimes in a speaker's lounge or wherever. But more and more events are actually sponsoring and organizing a podcast lounge.
Mm-hmm.
And last month, I had an opportunity to do that. It was great because the conference organizers actually helped line up a guest for me, which was a higher profile guest than I would have been able to get on my own, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And then they set up a room with 70 seats, a little stage. I had like a talk show going on, which was kind of crazy, but they had like some seats, a sofa, microphones. They had all the gear, so I didn't even need to bring the gear.
Yes.
So you talk about
yes. So finish that sentence because I'm going to cut you off.
Perfect. So you talk about visibility. The conference created this opportunity for my show to get to be seen, and they're even publicizing because it was at their event. So
Exactly.
You never know where it can go.
Exactly. And a quick note as we wrap up. Also, if you have a niche show, contact those organizers of events in your field and ask if you can have a podcast station. That's another fantastic way to grow your audience. And get a mic flag. It's the square thing around your microphone with your logo on it. And wrapping up, we do want to let you know that you can reach us at aapodcasters.org or .com for now. And we also want to give a shout out and mention to the WOC podcasters, that's Women of Color Podcasters, and they have members from all over the world as well. And we are in partnership with them to create Podthon, which is a virtual summit for podcasters based here in the States. So, Andrew, before we say goodbye, any last words?
I encourage people, if you're interested, go to podthon.com because we have recordings from Podthon 19, I think, available for purchase. But otherwise, stay tuned there for if you want to speak at next year's event.
So thank you so much for having us. We've really enjoyed our time, and happy International Podcast Day.
Thank you. I got to say that because earlier I got it wrong. I said podcasters. Happy International Podcast Day.
Lee and Andy, thank you so much for this great information. A lot of very actionable tips, and some of the best relationships I've had in the podcasting space have happened from going to those remote locations and having those remote conversations. So thank you very much for this information, and happy International Podcast Day to you too. Thank you for
Daniel.
joining us.
Bye.
For everyone else, before we go, I want to remind you about our sponsors over at internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors. This stream would not be possible without our great streaming partner, StreamYard. Check them out. We've got the link at internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors. And also a reminder that Focusrite is giving away a Scarlett 2i2. We've got the link for that also below this video at internationalpodcastday.com/live. Stay here on the live page. We've got another event coming up to continue the celebration of International Podcast Day. If you're watching on internationalpodcastday.com/live, you might have to refresh your page or press play after it refreshes, depending on how things work out for you in your browser. But we will be back in just a minute. Stick around and take this opportunity to tweet out with that hashtag International Podcast Day. Share it on social, Instagram, take a picture of your podcast studio, take a picture of you watching International Podcast Day's live stream. Celebrate podcasting, start that conversation. There's still time to do it. Hashtag International Podcast Day. Thanks for watching.